Madison.
Good morning, Maria. Now, the number one issue on voters' minds is the economy. The moderators asked about the deficit, but they failed to ask a question directly about inflation. But Vance made sure to hit on that issue, talking about how Harris hasn't solved it and really addressing that affordability crisis that is crushing Americans.
Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years, she had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%.
Now, Walz tried to defend his boss, outlining parts of their housing plan. The governor referenced his home state and the work that he's done there, cutting red tape, and promised more federal assistance.
We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. We don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
When pushed on whether that federal assistance, more spending, would just further drive up the cost of homes, Walz tried to immediately shut that down. And a huge missing piece of the debate last night, Maria, was the port strike, which could very well start to drive up those prices again. Maria?
Yeah, very surprised that did not come up. Thank you so much, Madison Allworth. Joining me now is Trump 2024 senior advisor, Jason Miller. Jason, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. I want to get your take. What were your takeaways from last night?
Maria, Senator Vance had a fantastic evening. You can see why President Trump picked him for the ticket. He is such a good messenger on talking about the economy, talking about we get it back to that Trump economy that we had, securing the southern border. And I think the other thing, too, you saw the contrast in ideas where Tim Walz was unable to defend, let alone articulate any sort of vision for Kamala Harris and their ticket. And for people who were tuning in last night, most viewers probably didn't really know either candidate who was on that stage very well. What they both had to do is introduce themselves. I thought that's what J.D. Vance did that was so genius, was he made sure to reintroduce himself to voters maybe didn't watch the convention speech, who haven't been paying that much attention, people who are undecided or independent who are tuning in to say, who's actually going to do something about the economy, who's going to speak to me? And I think J.D.'s background, his relatability, helps deliver that message from President Trump.
One of the rules last night was that the moderators would not fact check, which is explaining why they let this bit from Tim Walz on taxes go on. Watch this.
Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing.
So, you know, Jason, data from the IRS shows that it was actually the middle-income Americans who were the ones who saw the biggest decrease in taxes between 2017 and 2018 when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into effect. Americans who made between $50,000 and $100,000 a year saw tax liabilities drop twice as much as those making $1 million or more. Wasn't this an opportunity for J.D. Vance to remind everybody of this? And also, you know, right there should have been some pushback on the fact that Kamala Harris spent $7 trillion in 4 years. And that's why inflation shot up to 40-year highs.
Yeah, and Maria, one of the things tactically when you're in a debate like this and you realize that you have an opponent who's on the ropes, and be very clear, from that first answer, Tim Walz was standing there with a blank expression on his face and his mouth wide open. You realize that he did not have it going on last night. And with Senator Vance, this being his reintroduction on the national stage, you got to pick and choose when you're going to go for the jugular on this. What J.D. wanted to do is make clear that he connected with voters on inflation, which by far is the top issue that's driving people. And I think he was able to do that, talking about his own background as someone who's gone to sleep at night as a child with not being able to turn on the heat because they couldn't afford it. For someone who worked his way, joined the military, and really fulfilling his dreams, going to Yale Law School, a very impressive individual. And by doing that, he was able to communicate it to voters who probably aren't all that partisan when they tuned in.
Are you getting any information in terms of what's going on with the vote right now? I mean, Pennsylvania is already voting, Jason. 6 of the other 7 battleground states are on deck. You've got October 9th early voting begins in Arizona. October 15th, early voting begins in Georgia. October 17th, early voting begins in North Carolina. October 19th, Nevada. October 22nd, Wisconsin, early vote. What do you want to say in terms of these polls right now and what you're learning as Pennsylvania is already voting? I mean, we've got this new Quinnipiac poll. It shows an expanding race in key swing states for President Trump. In Georgia, President Trump has a 6-point lead over Kamala Harris, 50% to 44%. In North Carolina, Trump still has the edge, 49% to 47%. And of course, when it comes to the top issues Americans are concerned with, the economy and immigration, voters trust Trump to handle them better than Harris in both states. A new AARP poll is putting the focus on older voters. While Harris leads Trump by 3 points with voters nationally, the number jumps with Trump with voters over 50 years old. 53% want the former president, while 44% say they'd cast a vote for Harris. But I'm still struck with how close these polls are, given the fact that it's been President Trump doing all the talking about what he wants to do and Kamala Harris not giving us any information about how she wants to govern. Are you surprised by the polls, and how do you read these polls, Jason?
Well, they're starting to move for sure. President Trump is leading in all of the Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. We're leading in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I think we still have narrow leads. But the thing that what's coming off right now is that Kamala Harris's act of hiding, of not being able to articulate a vision. And by the way, these disasters that are happening, whether it's a longshoreman strike, whether it's the hurricane disaster, whether it's the chaos in the Middle East, people are looking to say Kamala Harris is not up for the job. We need a real president, a real leader back in the White House.
So what is your strategy? Are you looking to focus on Pennsylvania? A lot of people say, well, if he wins Pennsylvania, he wins the election. Are you looking at North Carolina, Georgia, and that block of states? What's the strategy to win this, Jason?
Well, all the above. As we've seen with the polling, President Trump is in position to go and do that. And the key thing as people start moving forward here is who actually is going to make that difference for them. You're going to see a lot of focus from President Trump in the coming days, definitely going to be on taxes. And that's something because Kamala Harris wants to repeal all of the Trump tax cuts. And don't buy this that she only wants to raise the corporate tax up to 28%. She's going to try to repeal all of the Trump tax cuts. That'll be a disaster for a lot of people watching right now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jason, great to talk with you. We'll be watching, certainly. We appreciate your time. Jason Miller joining us from the Trump campaign.